Hi, my name is John Brink. You're watching A History of the BC Forest Industry. Hi, thank you for joining us today. And we are joined as a guest today by Candra Burns, who is speaking with us from Germany and has a podcast called Talking Forest. Candra, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. The podcast is something that was a dream of mine and not in my original business plan, but then when I saw that I had the capability of bootstrapping and making sure it could happen, I've just worked through the Talking Forest podcast and I'm already into episode 51, which will be John. So thank you for having me on your TV show.
Excellent, Candra. So tell us a little bit about your background, because obviously, somehow you got into the forest part, and then you sound to me like, you are either Canadian or have at least no particular German accent. So how did that all kind of come about?
So my grandmother had a child out of wedlock from Canada. She was sent to a Seattle children's home, and that was my Uncle Tim. And so in Seattle, she met my grandfather, who is a fisherman up and down the Pacific coast. And he was based out of Nome, Alaska, Ocean Shores, Washington, and fished the Columbia all the way to the Aleutian Islands. And that is my heritage. So I'm quarter Canadian. My mom is half Canadian. My great aunt just passed away in Esquimalt in 2017. And
Wow.
so that Victoria, BC area is where I used to visit. I actually went there yearly, and I've marched in the Canada Day Parade in Victoria. I marched for it in 3 years.
So you are a citizen of which country?
I'm not a citizen of Canada. I don't have my dual citizenship,
Right.
and I have to ask my mom if she's seeking that. But I am in the United States as a citizen, and I'm on the SOFA agreement in Germany.
How do you call that agreement in Germany?
SOFA.
What does that mean?
It means that we are able to stay here as a military family, and once we get orders, we are then not on the SOFA agreement. So it's a contracted term with Germany and the military, and so I'm a military spouse living in Germany.
Interesting. So how long have you been in Germany?
We landed here in January of 2018. I used to have a full-time career, and I went from full-time career to full-time consultant. I was working in forest policy in the past, and the way that I got into forest policy was because I went to high school for natural resources. I was in 4-H and FFA. I did forestry competitions, and I was able to study it for so long in college that I got my an associate's in applied science and a bachelor's degree in forestry and natural resources emphasis. And once I got into forest policy, I could see how they communicated. And that's when I learned how to communicate. And that's my first Facebook contract, was working on a tall wood building research. And so that's why I've been promoting building with wood for 5 years. Absolutely love mass timber and building with wood. So it was natural for me to dive into it.
Yeah, and then what came about is you one of the first women in podcasting about the forest or the forest industry. How did that all come about?
I was influenced by Gary Vaynerchuk out of New York, and I was listening to his podcasts, and he said, here's this platform called Anchor, and I listened into how it was utilized and what it would do for my business. And it's a platform that actually spreads your podcast out between 8 or more platforms at one time. And as a bootstrapper, just with a Blue Yeti microphone and my own web camera here, I was like, well, that's great, because I don't have a production team and I don't have the budget for the production team. So once I figured out that that was a possibility, then I started building my marketing strategy. And the way that I market the podcast is very close to how I would market a company when they come on as my retainer client. And so that is just something that I have innately I'm able to do it. So my podcast and the marketing is really strong, and I like to do it for others. And so that's why I'm a social media consultant. And I specifically picked the forest sector because I studied it and was passionate about it my whole life growing up in the forest.
Yeah, and so when did you do your first official podcast?
I remember them being in the fall of 2018, and my first podcast guests were students that I am still mentoring today. They're graduating from bachelor's programs from Grace Harbor College. I started out in Grace Harbor College Associates Forestry program when it was brand new 12 years ago, and I started the Natural Resources Club. I'm glad to say that the people I've interviewed on my podcast are students who have been president and secretary of that club. It's still going strong today. And the forestry program has grown from an associate's all the way out to a bachelor's in forest management at a community college. So it's now affordable, and we're bringing in that worker retraining back into the community. So a lot of people have looked at me and said, oh my gosh, look what she did. We can do that too. So my first few podcast episodes were women students that I've been mentoring, and they mentor me as well. I love that mutual back and forth mentor-mentee relationship that we have.
So, and if you kind of look back when you first became involved in the forest sector in a general way, that was based in the time that you were around Washington State.
Yeah.
And the college that you're talking about that you were involved in, is that in Seattle?
It is near the coast. Our actual mascot is called the choker, which is a logging term if our audience isn't familiar, which I'm sure most of you are, but I was a choker. And so that's a choker setter out in the woods. And that's how you know Ocean Shores is the coast of Washington. And the college I went to was 45 minutes from Ocean Shores. And then if you go up the I-5 corridor, you reach Seattle in about an hour and a half.
Right. And then just again, for the benefit of our listeners, a choker is the choker is that they put around the tree as they skid it out of the woods, and then special people are choker setters. Not an easy task. It means making your way through the bush. You better be fit and you better be agile, because things happen very, very quickly. So so that's very interesting that it all kind of started there, and then obviously you're still in contact with the people. So from there on in, then if you kind of look back at early 2018, you were still in Washington State when you really started the first podcasting experience, right?
I had landed in Germany in early 2018, and then I started my first podcast the fall of 2018. So I'd already worked full-time in my business. I was already prospecting full-time clients, and I had a client load, and then I added podcasting on top of my client load as well.
How timely, Candra, really, if you think about it, because that was the infancy of the whole phenomenon around podcasting, which is now still in 2000, kind of exploding, if you wish, to a certain amount. It's happening all over the place. But you were really a pioneer, not only talking forest, but also in regards to a female being leading podcasting, and then especially on an international basis. So you're a pioneer.
Absolutely. And I love that. I'm really excited to bring this and show other people that are diverse that they can do it too. And if you guys really want to talk about budget, I've done this with a $100 Blue Yeti microphone and a webcam and a good internet connection. And it's really been something that has opened doors that I didn't know were available. And it's helped me show a presence around the world. And a lot of people, what I noticed in Washington State or even in Canada, there's pockets of the forestry community that keep it local, which is great, and they only feature local people. But I said, we actually should be featuring everyone in the industry because we're all connected. And so the great thing about when people hear an episode, say from the UK, they can hear that we're having similar patterns and similar things going on in each country. And I've visited over 9 countries, and I've seen a lot of the same things. We need to do more for diversity. We need to have more women leadership. Whenever I see white board members, I'm always asking, why can't we have diversity at the table? And even if you're an office assistant or a secretary in a forestry company, you deserve a seat at that table. So that's something that I'm really an advocate for. And I really hope that more and more companies can bring in that diversity. And so that was my elevator pitch that I came up with, was bridging age diversity and sustainability. And the sustainability piece is because if you think about it, I grew up in a logging community, and there isn't always, people don't know how sustainable, or in our first environmentalists are the loggers, but people don't know how, and they are not educated enough in the industry. When there's people outside of the industry that challenge that, we have to educate and tell them how it is sustainable. So that's why I added that piece into the elevator pitch that I give.
And to be good stewards of the resource, and it applies right across the board and across the world and around the world, right? If you're talking the Brazil, the Amazon forest, or the British Columbia, the forest, the region where I'm talking from is the central part of British Columbia, and Prince George in particular, which is the spruce capital of the world. On the other hand, about a month ago or so, we talked to a guest from Sweden, and so we are starting to more and more become involved on our podcasting side, which is called, On the Brink.
Yeah.
So somewhat appropriate, right?
It is. Yeah. I feel that way sometimes. And so it's really good that you can bring that and bring out the voices just like I have. And so that's been the interesting part, is their industry, when I was working in the forest policy area, is we championed a lot of people, but those champions, when you get in the community and they're the same people over and over again, you don't get that diverse point of view. And so I wanted people that are underdogs, people like you that had $25 in their pocket and went to a different country and created sawmills. Something that's a little bit different that people may not have heard about, or a story that is from the bootstraps and from the field. And so it's cool that you're also in that same wavelength, and you and I are on the same level of featuring people like that.
Exactly, and living the dream, right? So, and then at the same time, we have in common, obviously, loving lumber and the forest and everything surrounding it. And at the same time, advocating being good stewards of the resource. And the resource is precious, may it be in central Germany or in Schwarzwald, or may it be in Sweden, or for that matter, in central Canada or South America. It is an amazing, amazing world resource.
Yeah, and that's what I love talking about. And I want to bring to the people the different points of view from each country, and also the people who have really done something different. And so it was interesting when I brought on a guest who ideally some of our leadership would have thought is a forestry major. They're going to go do timber cruising. They're going to go into a forestry company, but they learned in that podcast that that person actually wanted to be involved in wildfire also. So you can be a forester and a wildfire specialist. You can have, as the states would say, your red card, go on fires and also be a forester. But that shocked a lot of people when they listened to the episode, because they didn't know that about that person, that they were passionate about that. So that's why we have this kind of thing where we ask questions. So I ask in my podcast, how would you like to see forestry change? Or what are the issues facing forestry today? And that kind of brings out a dialogue in the podcast, and then also on the social media when we get it promoting and going out.
Yeah, and then at the same time, with a lot of people, the forest industry is not well understood, I believe, and I think it is an obligation on those that have the passion for the industry, and that includes even CEOs of major companies, and in a lot of cases, are not being overly effective in getting the message out that the sustainability and global warming and all those issues that deal with the medium and long-term sustainability of that precious resource is extremely important to everybody. And, and the better the public at large understands us, the better. You
Yeah.
know, we started in the mid 90s and a movement here in Canada. Actually, the initial pilot project happened in Prince George here at the College of New Caledonia, you know, where we started an initiative that was called the Woodworks Initiative, meaning that how can we use wood better in terms of this building and really showcase you know, the beauty of wood and wooden structures. The same initiative went right across North America, and as a result, you know, wood is being used more and more precious and more in not only structural, but also decorative.
Yeah, and I'm really excited that companies are starting to come out with some marketing regimes and campaigns where they actually talk about, did you know that there is wood in this cell phone? Did you know that there is wood in your toothpaste? Did you know? And so those are really helping the public and reach the public, because what happened previously that I noticed in my state especially was, yes, we have all these chapters of groups like Society of American Foresters, and yes, we've been around for over 100 years, but when we have our picnics and when we have our field days, we're doing it with each other and maybe some neighbors here and there. It gets published in the local newspaper, but it doesn't get out as further than the community. And the community, if you're doing this as a yearly picnic, you're preaching to the choir. They already know that you have the picnic, it's around the same time, and that's great, and we love, you know, having photos and an article about this. But I thought, with Talking Forests, what can I do to reach more people that are maybe outside of those communities, and what medium can I use? And then I had already been contracted to do Facebook, Twitter, then I went into Instagram and now LinkedIn, and I have a LinkedIn course out called Opening Doors with LinkedIn. And I have just expanded that knowledge. And so that's why I like to consult and help people.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so exciting. And for us, it's the same in a way, although we are on Shaw, which is a television media here. And you know, so, and we did do this one, a history of the BC forest industry, as one platform in terms of getting the knowledge out more to the public at large, and talking about more regional issues, but also touching on the broader international issues. Hence, be interviewing people from Sweden, and have another one scheduled from Sweden that is operating about 9 or 10 different sawmills that we hope to be interviewing in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And obviously you know, are very special to us in terms of when we initially made contact and I was on your podcast, and to see you here on our platform, and for our guests that are watching, there we are talking on a media that is Zoom, that is so direct and so international, but at the same time we're talking about the same language, in language meaning the love and the passion for the forest. You know, in different parts of the world, where for all intents and purposes, the objectives on our part are the same as yours.
Absolutely. And that's what I've noticed is the continuity when I talk to experts. So my favorite thing to do is create social media for people if they don't already have it, for companies, businesses, and then teach them how to cross-reference things that they're doing. And actually, that's what I go in and do is I research who they already are partnered with, and then we go like and follow all of those folks. And then once we get into following and building that foundation of who their ambassadors are in their community, then we build content around what the community is about and what their main objectives are. And so that's been really cool. And then I get to consult which platform is best for them. And if you're more of a business, if you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing out. That's where I've gotten most of my opportunities. Like, so speaking of being in Germany, I actually got an opportunity to document a tallwood building in France, that they're building an entire block of CLT mass timber buildings. And the reason why I was able to go do that one day when the borders were open was because I asked on LinkedIn, hey, I see that you're on a building site. Is there any way that we could go out there and see this together? And we started commenting, and then it led to a lead generation of messages. And so he said, let me call the director of the site and figure out if we can go out and document it. And we did. And that turned out to be a whole blog for me. And that's just one of the many opportunities that I've afforded through LinkedIn.
Yeah, and then the other part, which makes you so unique, is not because of all the other things that we already talked about in terms of being a pioneer in podcasting, but actually it is you're on the cutting edge of major changes to how effective we communicate, around the world, which is still evolving as we speak, and obviously you are unique in terms of not only podcasting and have done that already for the last 2 years, but you build it into a business of bringing that even further together, and then creating an infrastructure, if you wish, that helps other people to become more effective in communicating their messages.
And if I notice that they cross over, or that there's an epidemiologist in the States, then there's other resources and there's other countries where if we're going to track where these invasive bugs are going, why not track that in a different country and then have the two experts come together and talk about the species. So that's something that I've really been passionate about, is connecting people and from across the pond and actually, seeing what they have as something that's going on in their country. And so whether it be invasive species, global warming, climate change, any of those things, it's just great that we're collaborating. And I give that global aspect, like you said, in communications, and it's not really been done. So I'm really just happy that I can even do this for everyone.
And the other part about it, and I feel exactly like you do about it, is in having somewhat similar backgrounds. Obviously, I was born in Holland in the lumber industry. My dad worked in there. My grandfather was a master carpenter. So the history is there. The passion was there. But then I spent time in Sweden, and then obviously, I came here when I was 24. But the first 7-8 years, I left school early. I said I was done early. I wanted to work with my hands in the lumber. So I started working when I was 15 in the lumber industry, and had the passion right from then on forward. And having had that experience and being trained as a furniture maker, when I came here to Canada with my $25.47, with the dream of building a mill, I had the base of what can be done. And that experience that I had, the international experience, helped me really to build my company here. But not only that, it allowed me a vision forward that respectfully not everybody or not many people had here, in terms of what can be done and where do we go from here, looking at that precious, beautiful forest land base that we have here, where timber grows like unbelievable, so that particular thing gave me an advantage which I can use today.
I also have full circle moments. So I was completely funded for my education, and I am now working for the people that funded my education. I have worked for tree farming communities, and I got scholarships and grants through them. And so I have completely full 180 gone around and started helping. And also in 2008, I was a Loggers Play Day princess. And 10 years later, I landed in Germany and went full time in talking forests.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I'm doing, and as we get close to the end here, I just want to, we got so much to talk about. We're going to have to do this again in the future for sure, right? But anyway, so then, so one of the things that we're doing here, I've always been very involved in the industry here, but also in terms of how do we, where do we go from here? And even more importantly, although we have the forest, we have the market, the timber is here, how do we create the skill sets for the future looking forward? And one of the things that we are looking at here, and we are very involved in with the College of New Caledonia, is developing a center of excellence and where we develop not only products and methods of manufacturing, but also looking at the forest base. How do we become better stewards? How do we increase the yield per hectare from our forest land base, and then how do we develop the new skill sets, of the next 5, 10, 20 years as to what that will look like, and creating products for a market, new products for new markets and new skill sets, all of that built around a center of excellence that develops their knowledge from visiting places that where you were trained and still communicate with, going all the way to Europe and looking what they are doing. That's what we are doing at right now in terms of as we go forward. We want to develop a center of excellence here in Central British Columbia where people come from far and wide to see what we're doing, how we're doing it, how can they use it, and how can we develop new markets for new products, in the marketplace.
And John, I think the place to start that you've already done is education. I think building your college programs, mentoring your college students, and continuing to expand programs that already exist in the wood sector and forest sector at the education level, and worker retraining programs are really going to excel what you've been talking about.
Excellent. And Candra, it is a delight to have you on our show, and for the people of in our circle to hear you, and obviously we are so much moving in the same direction. So it has been a delight. Thank you for being my guest, and we have to do this again.
Yes, thank you so much, John.
Thank you for watching us today. Our guest was Candra Burns, who is a podcaster and a pioneer podcaster who has a show called Talking Forest, all the way from Germany. And so watch us again next week with another exciting guest.